Today, we're going to talk about two scary true stories about caving that turned into life-threatening disasters because of simple mistakes. The first story is about a young teacher who made a deadly mistake that put himself and 12 kids in a lot of danger. The second one is about a scary dive into an underwater tunnel that looked like it was going to end badly from the start. As always, viewers should be careful. The Devil's Den Tragedy. On April 9, 2005, 20-year-old Richard Hears took 12 eager kids on what was supposed to be a short instructive tour into the Devil's Den Cave, a meandering natural labyrinth that lies beneath the Ozark Mountains. The cave was noted for its magnificent structures, but for its tight, harsh passages. Richard was sure of himself, even though he was just a few years older than some of the oldest kids. He had been to the cave before and thought he knew it well enough to show other people around. Melissa Jones, another teacher, and his companion, stayed outside the cave. She was supposed to wait for a second set of students to arrive later in the day. It was spring, and the temperature outside was about 68 degrees, 20 degrees. But within the cave, it stayed at a consistent 50 degrees, 13 degrees, which was just low enough to be dangerous for lengthy periods of time. The kids, who were 8 to 12 years old, were quite excited. Most of them had only been to caverns that were set up for tourists, with paths and lighting. They went in with helmets, headlamps, and very little gear, just some water bottles, food, and a first aid kit that Richard carried in his bag. Everything went well at first. The crew got more and more sure of themselves as they made their way through low ceilings, convoluted tunnels, and slick limestone. Richard, on the other hand, saw something he hadn't planned for: his body. He had gained roughly 15 pounds, 7 kilos, since his last trip to the cave. It didn't feel like anything at the moment, but in a small cave, every inch counted. At 11:30 a.m., they got to a vertical crack in the rock that was just 10 inches, 25 centimeters wide, and about 6 feet, 1.8 meters tall. Richard recognized this thin slot from a previous trip. It joined 2 horizontal passages. It was hard, but he thought he could do it. He quickly decided to send the kids through first and then follow. The kids turned to the side and squeezed through the little space. The stone scraped across their backs and ribs, but in the end, all 12 made it. As they slid into a tunnel that was a little bigger, the lights on the walls in front of them flickered. Richard then went inside the crack. Something didn't feel right away. The space held him closer than he thought it would. His back was against one wall and his chest was against the other. He kept going, breathing out and inching his way in. He stopped halfway through. He couldn't move ahead, and even worse, he couldn't walk back. His hips, which were bigger than his chest, became stuck in the tightest spot. He tried to turn and pull his stomach in. Nothing worked. The stone held him tightly. The panic came right away. His chest rubbed against the cold limestone, and he was breathing quickly and shallowly. It hit him like a ton of bricks. He was stuck, and the only way out for the 12 kids was through him. The kids on the other side of the crack quickly figured out that something was extremely wrong. Their happy, bright smiles turned to terror when they saw Richard having trouble in the crack. Some people froze. Some people started to cry. The older ones moved closer to aid, but there was nothing they could do. Richard was stuck in the small slot and couldn't move at all. Melissa was still unaware outside. She looked at her watch every now and again, assuming the gang would be back at 3 p.m. as planned. An hour went by inside the cave. Richard did everything he could. He turned, moved, and even tried to push his way out. But the more he moved, the more the stones hurt his sides. His legs hung down below him and started to go numb. The blood flow slowed down. He started to experience tingling and cramps. He yelled back directions to the kids. "Be calm, stay close together to stay warm, and save your energy." The gang was in difficulty by the second hour. The cold stone started to take away their bodily heat. They shook a much. The air was starting to alter because the oxygen was running out and carbon dioxide was taking its place. First came headaches, then dizziness and nausea. Melissa still waited. 2 of the youngest kids had fallen asleep by the 3rd hour. It wasn't a good night's sleep. It was early hypothermia. There was very little water left. The munchies were all gone. Richard could hardly talk anymore. It hurt to breathe. At last, 3 p.m. came and gone. Melissa, who was now worried, told the group that they were late. Park rangers were called, and a search squad was put together. When rescuers finally got to the group deep inside the cave, they were shocked. Richard was still stuck in the crack, even though he was barely awake. The kids were stuck on the other side, pallid and shaking, and couldn't get away or be reached. The first attempts to rescue were clumsy. The first responders used sledgehammers and chisels without any specific training. Every hit made the cave shake. One ranger hurt his hand trying to smash the rock. They rapidly saw that they were making matters worse. Washington County Search and Rescue got there 2 hours later. They have the right training and a plan. They didn't break the rock. Instead, they focused on Richard. He got stuck due to the way his clothes fit and where his hips were. They carefully ripped off his garments and put tubular webbing under his arms. They used climbing gear to hoist him a few inches, which was enough to shift him to a somewhat wider area. Richard was rescued after being stuck in stone for 5 painful hours. Blood poured back into his legs, making them feel like daggers of anguish. As they took him out, he yelled in pain. At the same time, other people ran to the kids. Some of them didn't respond at all. They used emergency blankets to get warm again. They gave IV fluids to treat dehydration. All of the kids lived, but just barely. The story was big news all around the country. Richard would get better physically later, but the mental scars would stay. His overconfidence almost cost 12 innocent people their lives, including his own. The Devil's Den was gorgeous but cruel, and it turned a field trip into a nightmare. The second story. Stuck under the sea. The second story takes place in the turquoise, misleading waters off the coast of Croatia. A dive spot near Shedro Island that looks serene contains a dangerous secret, an underwater tunnel network that has killed more than one person. In 2014, an experienced diver named Jonas and 2 buddies went to investigate a cave system that was underwater and noted for its haunting beauty and very little margins for error. The plan was easy: dive, look around, and come back. They didn't think about how the cave was set up, with lots of bottlenecks, blind corners, and rooms full of silt that made even small movements chaotic. The small opening forced them into darkness as they went down. The water became cloudy with silt, which made it harder to see. A single errant kick sent clouds of particles flying, making a fog that blinded everyone. Then it occurred. An incorrect turn. A channel that is getting smaller. Jonas, who was in charge of the group, went into a narrow hallway. The others were uneasy, but went along. They knew they were gone in a matter of minutes. People started to panic. The way out was gone. The silt made it tough to find your way around, turning the cave into a confusing maze of stone and darkness. Every breath became vitally important. As Jonas looked into the dark nothingness, Panic gripped his chest because he knew they were running out of time. The sea's cold, heavy weight took the place of the glittering promise of brightness. Jonas's training took over. He told his friends to stay close and save their energy. But worry was a parasite that thrived on doubt. They tried to find their way back by following light scuff prints in the sediment and patterns in the limestone walls. But everything seemed the same. The only sound was their own breathing, which got louder and more chaotic. The amount of oxygen was going down. Jonas's gauge made a high-pitched beep that echoed like a siren through the silence. In a moment of dawning terror, he understood that his tank wouldn't make it back, even if they could find the right way. Every second drew them closer to a point of no return. The gang came to a standstill. They sought to make plans while floating in calm. Jonas took the lead again, his thoughts going over mental maps of cave networks. He was sure there was a side room to the left. He went that way. His light beam barely broke through the darkness, lighting up a path with recognizable bumps. But the silt came after like a plague. Every time I moved, I could only see a few inches. And then there was a problem. A slab that had collapsed barred the way, either lately or from a previous collapse. No matter what, it was impossible to get through. Jonas turned around and waved his arms around furiously, trying not to show how scared he was. He looked at his wrist and saw that his oxygen level was dangerously low. He felt desperate all over his body. He could feel his pulse in his temples and his breathing was shallow. With each breath, bubbles floated up with an uncanny stillness, yet turmoil reigned in his mind. He told his friends to turn around again and look for higher ground or a probable air pocket. His gut told him to check out one last hallway. He waved them away and swam away from them by himself,